But we must never forget, this is not a war of choice. This is a war of necessity. Those who attacked America on 9/11 are plotting to do so again. If left unchecked, the Taliban insurgency will mean an even larger safe haven from which al-Qaeda would plot to kill more Americans.
It's really easy for the mainstream media to manipulate the public with a lot of fear-mongering into making people totally terrified of an object like a gun. And you see this in the fact that children are being expelled from school for having a Pop-Tart shaped like a gun, or a water gun, or a drawing that might look like a gun. It's all insane, delusional fear, almost terror. The media is terrorizing the public over this issue of firearms. But in truth, guns are remarkably safe as long as they're in the hands of law-abiding citizens, and that's exactly who the gun control laws wants to take them away from. So the gun control laws are having precisely the opposite effect that we would want if we want to reduce gun crime. I mean, I'm wearing a gun right now and it's not shooting anybody.
It takes research, but we can actually examine statistics from the FBI, CDC, Department of Homeland Security, and other major government organizations in their own documents to find out how to get to the bottom line of gun death figures. Let's cut through what you've heard in the media, the political component, and instead get right to the numbers. The first thing to touch upon, and perhaps the most relevant to our modern society, is how deadly firearms really are. First of all, let us examine the factors that are responsible for deaths within the United States. We'll be examining data from the CDC for leading causes of death, as well as statistics from the FBI regarding homicides. We find the following numbers. We find that annual deaths from heart disease based on CDC data total 597,689. Cancer deaths total 574,743. Stroke deaths, 129,476. Deaths from accidents, unintentional injuries, 120,859. Alzheimer's disease, 83,494. Even diabetes, 69,071. Even the flu, influenza, 50,097. Suicide deaths, 38,364. But what about overall weapons deaths? We find using 2009 FBI data, the number totaled 13,636, drastically lower than the previous leading causes. And then we get into overall firearm deaths taken from the weapon deaths. From that we find 9,146. These may not have been the kind of numbers you were expecting.
Many people don't realize that the number of gun deaths in America is actually quite small compared to the number of people killed by Western medicine. 783,000 Americans are killed each year by what's called iatrogenic deaths, death by doctor and pharmaceuticals and medical mistakes. If you want to save lives in America, you should start where the deaths are actually happening. And it's from preventable things like cancer, like heart disease, like pharmaceutical side effects. Gun deaths relative to that are absolutely minuscule, and most of those deaths are even gangbangers shooting each other. It's not just random people on the street getting shot. It's people who are attacking each other over drugs.
If you've been following the mainstream media, you may have thought the number would have been at least over 100,000, perhaps even higher than diabetes or suicide. The reality is that the number may be shockingly low to you, despite what preconceived notions you may have surmised.
America is not the Wild West that you are depicting. We only have the problem in our cities and unhappily in our schools, where people like you have been able to get laws put on the books that keep people from being able to defend themselves. I honestly don't understand why you would rather have people be victims of a crime than be able to defend themselves. It's incomprehensible.
You're an unbelievably stupid man, aren't you?
But it's still 9,146. So let's now break down the figure to get the specific factors. Of the 9,146 firearm deaths, 6,452 were from handguns, only 348 from rifles, 418 from shotguns, 94 from other guns, and 1,834 from unknown guns.
The assault weapons ban and the limitation on the size of magazines. Let me say this as clearly as I can. This is just the beginning. We believe that weapons of war have no place on our streets.
Well, Lisa and Russ, this was a violent confrontation of an apparent burglar which occurred behind me at this house around noon today here on Henderson Ridge Lane. Authorities tell us it started when a man came to the door and knocked a few times. No one answered, but authorities tell us the homeowner, a woman, was inside the house with her twins, a 9-year-old boy and a 9-year-old girl. They say she called her husband and that he told her he wasn't expecting anyone to come to the house and not to answer the door. The next thing authorities say is that the man went to his car and returned with a crowbar. In the meantime, the husband called 911 and had deputies dispatched here. The woman and her 2 children, we're told, went upstairs and hid in a crawl space. The man, who was downstairs, broke into the house and eventually made his way to where they were located.
And then all of a sudden, the crawl space door opens where she and her 2 children are, and she's face to face with this perpetrator.
And then
who's in turn staring at her and her 2 kids and a .38 revolver.
What'd she do next?
She fires all 6 shots.
And then what happened?
Well, she comes out of the crawl space and she's standing over the perpetrator, who she says is crying, telling her to stop shooting.
And authorities tell us after that, 32-year-old Paul Slater of Loganville got into his car after he left the home, shot and wounded, and missed the exit as he was trying to drive out of this subdivision. They say he crashed his car on the other side of the subdivision. Authorities got here, the deputies got here, they called an ambulance. He was rushed to Gwinnett Medical Center, shot several times. We're told he's now in critical condition. The woman, by the way, and her 2 children made their way eventually, rushed over here actually to the neighbor's house next door. And Sheriff Joe Chapman with the Walton County Sheriff's Office tells me that a brief review of the details in this case indicates to him that this was a justifiable shooting of a homeowner defending her house and her life.
Rifles have been demonized as powerful tools of homicide that are to blame for large numbers of yearly deaths. But as it turns out, only 348 per year are actually killed using rifles. Now, of that number, we must ask, how many are using illegal weapons and non-gang related? And furthermore, how many of these murders occur in gun-free cities? Valid questions, but you may be wondering still how this relates to other weapons. Rifles are the most dangerous weapon available to most individuals, after all. Let's take a look at the FBI data for homicides committed via non-firearm sources to get an idea of how it compares to the death toll of key firearms like rifles and shotguns. Knives and cutting tools accounted for 1,825 deaths in 2009, 1,477 more than rifles. Clubs, hammers, and other blunt objects like bats totaled 611 in 2009. Still 263 more than rifles. Hands, fists, and feet actually killed 801 in 2009, 453 more than rifles. Knives, hammers, hands, and feet kill more per year than rifles and shotguns combined by thousands of cases. But we don't ban knives, hands, or feet.
But we must never forget, this is not a war of choice. This is a war of necessity. Those who attacked America on 9/11 are plotting to do so again. If left unchecked, the Taliban insurgency will mean an even larger safe haven from which Al-Qaeda would plot to kill more Americans.